And we are live. What's going on, YouTube? And welcome to Goal Line Hockey Live. It's Kevin Forte, and unfortunately, I was not able to do a live stream last night for the Leafs versus Panthers game. But based off of just how crazy things have been here over the last really 24 hours since the Maple Leafs were eliminated, I thought we should do an entire live stream today. What's going on, Morgan? Yeah, we have a lot to talk about today. A lot going on in Leafland, a lot of discussion. And I wanted to look at the Leafs roster and kind of play armchair GM and take a look at the Leafs and what they could possibly do here this summer, some potential trades, who are some guys I think they could bring in to maybe try and fix the roster, who could be going out. We're going to take a look at all of that today. So make sure once you guys join the stream, make sure to like the stream. I do appreciate that. Like the video. I also have some good news as we have a new shop. So make sure to check the link in the description down below. And I believe it's in my other videos. We've got hats, shirts, all that kind of stuff, slides for the summer. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, make sure to check it out. I already got my sample order, so make sure to check that out. I'm hopefully going to be getting that very soon and be rocking the new logo and some of the new merch. So make sure to check that out if you want to help support the channel. So with that out of the way, there's a lot of questions. You guys are already jumping in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, and make sure to like the stream. So looking at the Leafs roster right now, we're going to take a look at who is currently a UFA, and there's plenty of guys. So of course the big ones, you got Kerfoot up front, Ryan O'Reilly, David Kampf, Nola Chari, Michael Bunting, Wayne Simmons, and Zach Aston Reese. Then on the back end, TJ Brody. Is that right? No. Justin Hall, Luke Shen, and Eric Gustafsson. And then you have an RFA goalie in Ilya Samsonov. So when you take a look at what the Leafs look like, I would say looking at those guys, Kerfoot, I think is going to be too expensive to keep. I think that ideally they'd like to keep Kerfoot around. I just don't think they're going to have the money to do so unless he's willing to come in on a really cheap contract. Ryan O'Reilly, I hate to say it, I think they'd love to keep him around. I don't think they're going to have the money to keep O'Reilly either. So I think O'Reilly's gone. David Kampf, I could see coming back, and Nola Chari. I think both of those guys very likely could end up back in Toronto in the fall. Michael Bunting is not going to return. I think they're going to go in a different direction. I think that kind of, especially in the first round, was kind of a casualty of the Nazem Kadri situation with the way he got suspended and things like that. It didn't go well for Michael Bunting. I think he is gone. Wayne Simmons and Zach Aston Reese, I think both of those guys are gone. So in terms of forwards that are UFAs that could be coming back, I think the best case scenario is honestly probably David Kampf and Nola Chari. Other than that, I think that's kind of it. I think everybody else will be hitting the open market this summer. On the back end, Justin Hall, I think they're going to go in a different direction. I don't think they're keeping Justin Hall. Luke Shen, I think they're going to try and get back. I think Shen likes being a Leaf. I think that's a guy they'd like to keep long term. Eric Gustafsson, I think there's definitely an argument to be made that Gustafsson actually was a pretty good defenseman there, especially as a depth guy. But I think that that's a guy that could end up staying. So in terms of defense, Shen and Gustafsson might stick around, but I do not think Justin Hall will be back. Thank you for joining us, Luis, Nathan, Morgan. You guys are awesome. They should bend the knee to the Florida Panthers. Go Cats, Stanley Cup here. The Panthers come. All right, so there you go. So there's our Panthers fan in the chat. Thank you, Luis. Trade Matthews, he was terrible. Yeah, so I just posted a video earlier today. Make sure to check that out. But I kind of talked about how the Leafs really shouldn't trade Matthews. Like, I understand there's frustration there, but let's be honest, this cannot all be put on Austin Matthews. The blame, there's plenty of blame to go around. It cannot all lay at the feet of Matthews. He was not good enough in the second round. He'd be the first one to tell you that. But the reality is he's just not the type of player that comes up clutch in the playoffs. The problem is, though, like, he's not the type of guy you can just let go or trade. And I hate to say it, like, I've heard people saying trade Marner and Nylander for Connor Bedard. Guys, if I'm the Blackhawks, you're not trading Bedard for anything. I don't care what you throw at me. You could throw me Tavares, Marner, Nylander, and Matthews, and I don't think I trade for Connor Bedard. I still don't think I take that trade if I'm the Blackhawks. I think Connor Bedard could be that type of player that is that impactful. You don't make that move. So, again, not that the Leafs would even consider doing that in the first place, but I just I just don't think we're going to see something where Matthews is going anywhere. I just don't think it's going to happen. Then you consider the fact here too that you know, you look at kind of the core of this team right now. I just don't see how you move any of them, right? Like maybe you move Nylander, but he's one of your better contracts and he came up clutch. He came up big in game 4. He scored a goal, right? Like, so how can you get mad at a guy like Nylander? How is he going to get punished? I hate to say it. I don't think you move Matthews, and I don't think you can move Tavares. I don't think they're moving. So if you are to move any of those 4 players, it would be Nylander or Marner. Now, Marner, you can make the argument. I think there is an argument to be made to move Mitch Marner. But again, who's coming in and like that trade will forever be whoever the GM, whatever GM comes in and makes that move, because I think Dubas is gone. Whatever GM comes in and trades Marner, that is going to be the move that lasts with them forever. So they better make sure that whatever they get for Marner is as good or better than Marner, because that guy will have his head on the chopping block very quickly. So unfortunately, the idea of even trading Marner just there's not enough to it. Now, here's another thing I look at. I look at a guy on the market. A lot of people have had Pierre-Luc Dubois linked to the New York Rangers, and for good reason. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that is on the table. But what about the Leafs going after Pierre-Luc Dubois? Now, you have to go into this trade knowing it's a rental. It's a 1-year move because we know that he's going to Montreal next summer. But he is an RFA this summer and is going to be getting a qualifying offer. So he's probably going to sign whatever qualifying offer is available, take the 1-year deal, and he's going to Montreal next year. So if the Leaf fans can live with knowing that this is a 1-year deal for Dubois, we trade whatever we have to trade for Dubois. Is this not the better version of Ryan O'Reilly? We saw what he did even in that first round series against Vegas with the Winnipeg Jets. He's a really good center come playoff time in particular. Now, how would he handle the Toronto media and things like that? That's also part of the equation, and maybe that's part of the problem. But I think Dubois is that kind of pain in the ass, Ryan O'Reilly esque player that come playoff time would be a perfect fit. And again, you have to live with and stomach knowing that it's a 1-year deal with him. But I think that's something that you have to be considering, at the very least, if you're the Leafs GM, you have to be looking at it, right? You have to at least ask the Jets, listen, what's the price for Dubois? And if it's super exorbitant, all right, then whatever. You don't move forward with it, but you have to at the very least look at it. What would it take for Dubois? And then kind of go from there. Now, with that said, what about Nylander? So Nylander's kind of interesting. I've heard some rumors that even a team like the Anaheim Ducks could be looking at a guy like that. Um, the problem is with Nylander, like, what do you get in return? Are you looking for a defenseman? Because ideally, a team that's trading for Nylander needs to address something up front. So they're looking for another big top 6 winger that can score. Okay. But what are you getting in return if you're the Leafs? Do you want to bring in another top 4 defenseman, right? Ideally, that's probably what you're looking at. So if that's the case, you know, I mean, this is kind of interesting and kind of depending on what happens with the Hurricanes this summer. Yeah, Plasma, thank you for joining us, but he says blow the whole team up. I just don't think that's feasible, guys, right? Like in NHL, be a GM, right? In GM mode or franchise mode, whatever it's called in the video game, that works. But the reality is that's not how this is going to go, right? We all know that it's going to be a new GM, it's going to be a coach, But the reality is that's what they need most. They need a structure. And I said this in my video earlier. You look at the Carolina Hurricanes, right? The Carolina Hurricanes, and this is no disrespect to anybody on the roster of the Hurricanes, but let's be realistic here. You look at that roster on paper right now with four top six wingers out of that team, or top six forwards out of that team, out of the lineup injured throughout most of, if not the entirety of the playoffs so far. They have gotten through two decent teams, right? In the Islanders, who had a good run in 2020 and 2021, and the Devils, who have been a good team this year. They are so defensively sound that despite not having all that talent and guys that are opportunistic goal scorers, they have been able to find themselves in the Eastern Conference Finals. You could argue the same thing with the Florida Panthers. They don't have this super beefed up roster, but they're a playoff type team that is difficult to play against in a 7-game series. And I think that's the thing that the Leafs lack the most is a coach that's got that systematic approach, that there's no kind of freewheeling. I think that's part of the problem with Keefe is he lets these guys freewheel it too much. There needs to be more structure around what they already have because they have the opportunistic goal scorers, right? We saw what Nylander did in that tying goal, or the goal that gave them the tying goal, right? In the third period, right? They have guys that can score. The opportunistic goal scorers are there, but how they play in their own end, in their own zone, is why they struggle. So kind of how I look at this thing is you need a new coach that is very systematically sound, and ideally would have been someone like a Barry Trotz or a Rod Brendamore, but you have to find that, right? And those are a dime a dozen. There's not that many of them, but they are around, okay? So that's the first thing you're looking for. Then you need to find a shutdown center. Ideally, someone similar to what you have in Ryan O'Reilly. I just don't think O'Reilly's going to come back. Maybe he does, but again, we have to look at reality, right? You guys keep saying blow the team up, and thank you for joining us. They're not going to blow the team up. It's not going to happen. So you have to look at the next best solution. Other than completely blowing up the team, what is the next best option? Bringing in a shutdown center and getting a very systematically sound coach that is going to be good in your own defensive zone. Because the goaltending, I think, is competent, right? Joseph Woll, yeah, he didn't play great. And the last goal, you can't blame him, but with Samsonov, I think they have a decent goaltending group. And a lot of you guys are saying, maybe they don't need a goalie. I could make the argument they do. But again, with their cap structure, can they afford to spend $7 or $8 million on John Gibson this summer? Academically, probably not. So again, you keep that tandem at a fairly cheap contract rate, Samsonov and Woll. All right. Then you take a look at maybe what could be next, right? Now you take a look at, can they add another defenseman? I think something that they're missing is someone like who Carolina has, like a Brent Burns or a Jacob Slavin, just a really good shutdown defenseman. Now, they kind of had that in Jake Muzzin, but he's hurt. So what else is available then? If those guys, I don't think they're trading Slavin or Burns. So now you got to look for somebody around the league that's kind of like that. So who could that be, right? So you got to look for that. And again, this is why I don't get paid millions of dollars to be a GM, because I don't necessarily know who that defenseman is, but that's what you're looking for if you're the Leafs this summer. So you're looking for that top six shutdown center, ideally someone that can jump into the top six, but could be a third line, right? Maybe that's Pierre-Luc Dubois. And then a defenseman that can be that shutdown defenseman. Maybe he plays on the top pair with Riley. Maybe he's on the second pair. And is probably going to replace what they have in, I think TJ Brody's gone. I don't think TJ Brody comes back. If you're looking at a defenseman that maybe gets traded, I think it's TJ Brody. They let Justin Hall walk, but they need to change something up there because the defense, it was okay, but it wasn't good enough, right? Then you take a look at in the bottom six. I think I like a lot of their bottom six guys, but I don't know who's going to stay, right? If they can keep Achari and Kampf, I think that's perfect. Even Zach Aston Reese to an extent. Wayne Simmons is done. He was on waivers. I think that experiment is done. So I think they're going to look at the open market, try and find another depth winger, right? Maybe another center, depending on what happens with Achari and Camp. And then defense, I think they'd try to look for another like Luke Shen defenseman, right? They've already got Luke Shen. Hopefully they keep him because I think he was actually very good for them. But I think they need somebody else similar to what Radko Gudas kind of was last year with the Leafs. And if they can find that, I think they're gold, right? So keep an eye out for that. Now, what else are you guys saying here in the chat? Kev, what was your opinion on the non-goal call yesterday on the Panthers and Toronto goalie? I know the tinfoil hats come out for that one, but I think if you're looking at this in the sense of was it a goal or not, I agree with the call. It's a brutal call. I mean, you could clearly see, right? It's in the net and then it comes out. Honestly, I think it was a goal. I do. I understand the NHL coming out defending it, saying it wasn't a goal, but I think it was a goal. In my honest opinion, it was a goal. But again, it's a judgment call. And the problem is, and I said this in the first round of the playoffs, and the second round was doing so well in terms of decent officiating. The more gray area there is in officiating, the more frustrated fans are going to be. And I can't imagine, I have a ton of sympathy for the new fans in today's hockey because how do I explain to a new fan that that's a goal or not a goal? It's unexplainable. It really is. And I'm an Islanders fan. You guys see the banner here. I'm an Islanders fan. I'm not supposed to like the Leafs, but that was a goal in my opinion. I don't know how you can rule that. Like again, like I said, there's too much gray area, and the second it's a judgment call, there's no definition, black or white. Is this or is this not a call? Right? Even with the goalie interference calls, they're so subjective. The kicking the puck in the net calls are so subjective. One call is a kicking goal, one goal is a kicking motion, and it is a goal. One is a redirection. Like there's way too much gray area. And it makes it to the point where even someone who's been watching hockey since I was my first birthday, I went to an Islander game, right? And every year after that, I went to an Islander game for my birthday, basically. Since day one, I've been a hockey fan, and I still can't tell you what that call was. So it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating, and I totally understand why Leaf fans are upset by that call. But at the end of the day, right? Like if you go into it with the mindset like everybody's against us, and I think the Islanders fell victim to that in the first round against Carolina. And the second they stopped doing that, they actually played much better in games 5 and 6, right? They won game 5 in Carolina. They won game 6. They lost game 6 in a close game against the Hurricanes, but the damage was already done. And I think what's funny is too, especially in that Islander series, in game 2 with that Mayfield high stick from the Hurricanes, those refs have not officiated a game in the second round. So I think the NHL kind of punished those guys, but at the cost of the Islanders losing game 2. And who knows how different things could have been in that series. They were saying they blew the whistle before it went in. Again, yeah, but that's again, it's sort of a judgment call because, well, was the intent to blow the play dead? Like there's too much gray area, right? If the whistle wasn't blown, like the easy solution to that, in my opinion, is if the whistle wasn't blown, then the whistle wasn't blown. Whether they intended to blow it or not doesn't matter. That creates gray area. If you can replay it and the whistle was not blown, then it's a goal. If the puck goes in the net before the whistle was blown, whether the intent was there or not, it's a goal in my opinion. Don't bring up the Mayfield high stick. Yeah, plasma. Yeah, but you get what I'm saying, right? It was a blatant high stick that they didn't call, whether you agree with it or not. There's no judgment to that, in my opinion. They just didn't call it because it's a playoff game. They don't want to call it in overtime. I understand. But again, that's part of the reason people are frustrated with officiating. Now, don't get it twisted, guys. People are upset with officiating across all of sports in football, in basketball, all of these sports, there is problems with officiating. So don't think it's just an NHL problem, but understand that especially baseball. I think baseball honestly has it the worst, in my opinion. But I digress. It is what it is. Officiating goes your way this game, officiating goes against you that game, right? It is what it is. It's how you come back from it. And the Leafs had plenty of opportunities. Like, again, you could say whatever you want, but they lost this series in 5 games. Like, they lost 4 of those 5 games. In a 60-minute period for each of those games, and sometimes more, they couldn't find a way to win more than one game. So I understand the frustration, but at the end of the day, they still couldn't find a way to get it done, right? Good teams find a way to win. And the Leafs have not been able to do that in this playoffs, in last playoffs, in 2021, in 2020, in 2019, and so on and so forth since they brought in Matthews in 2016. It is what it is. You have to find a way to overcome that, right? Tampa was the best team in 2020. They won the Stanley Cup. In 2021, Tampa was one of the better teams. They won the Stanley Cup. You find a way to win if you're good enough. Colorado won last year. So you get what I'm saying. It doesn't matter. It is what it is. You have to find a way to get through that. Yeah, that's true, Plasma. NFL and roughing the passer is pretty brutal. Guys, if you can, make sure to like the stream. I really do appreciate it if you do likes and if you get more people in here. But yeah, the officiating is definitely it's definitely a problem across all the sports. So don't think this is just an NHL thing. So like I was saying earlier, so what we have to look at here, you've got Matt Murray for another deal, another year. I think you move out Matt Murray. Like legitimately, I think Murray with 1 year left, $4.5 million per season, you try to move him to somebody, right? Maybe he goes to Chicago, kind of like you did with Peter Mrazek. You try to move that contract out. Honestly, I think Jake Muzzin's going to go on LTIR. I don't know if he's going to play out the rest of his deal. So that kind of sucks, but I don't know what's going to happen there. Nick Robertson's going to be back healthy next year. Matthew Knies is going to be back healthy next year, right? Ideally. So you've got 2, I would say, top 6 capable forwards coming into the lineup that weren't in game 5. So that's kind of optimistic, right? So the Leafs, everybody thinks it's all doom and gloom, but there are players on this team that are going to help them next year. And Matthew Knies, yes, wasn't able to play throughout the entirety of the playoffs, but those guys will be back healthy next year. So what we did see from Matthew Knies is very promising. I'm excited to see what he can do for them. And yeah, Scott Jacob, thank you for the input because I totally agree. Officiating is an excuse. All teams face good and bad calls. It's about heart, and we have zero. I could not have said it any better myself. Thank you so much for that, Scott. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, they need cap relief. So that's the other point we're kind of getting into is if the Leafs are going to make moves, TJ Brody has 1 more year left on his deal. He's making $5 million. I think they tried that project. It's failed. TJ Brody had points during the season where he looked good, but he's got to go. I think he's got to go. Matt Murray's got to go. You got to move that contract. I think Muzzin goes on LTIR to start next season. You're going to have Robertson and Knies on entry-level contracts next year. So that's going to help you out. That's going to free up some cap space. Those are 2 guys that can play either on your either your first, second, or third line. I think Robertson and Knies are going to be critical next year. That's going to be some good scoring depth. I look at some of the other guys on this team. I think they'd like to keep Luke Schenn. Up front, everybody's talking about moving one of the core 4. I just don't think they need to, right? If they move out $9 million, okay, between Murray and Brody, that's $9.5 million right there. Then you put a guy like Jake Muzzin on LTIR. I just don't think he's going to play again. Hopefully he does play next year, right? But again, I just don't think it's going to happen. From what I've heard, I think Muzzin's done. So put him on LTIR. All right, that's $14.5 million of cap space right there for the Leafs. All right. So what do? You hopefully try to get O'Reilly back. See if he wants to come back. I think he does. I wouldn't be shocked if O'Reilly came back, but that might change the plans of what they do. So either way, you have that shutdown center. So whether it's O'Reilly, who they re-sign, or they try to get somebody who's available, maybe it ends up being a guy like Dubois, right? Maybe they go down that route. Bring in a new defenseman, right? You've got Luke Shen, who I think is a good shutdown. Get another good shutdown defense, right? See who's available on the open market. I think they should definitely be going after someone. Um, you lock up Ilya Samsonov. I think he's been very good this season. I really liked him with the Hershey Bears, and I'm really glad to see him succeeding at the NHL level. So I think that's going to be another good one they need to keep. So you're still going to have some money to work with, right? Joseph Wall is still on entry level money till 2025. Find a way to make that work. Yeah, that is not much cap space. But again, that's $14.5 million despite the money you have in Matthews, Tavares, Marner, and Nylander. That's actually not that bad. That's not too bad. And that's with guys coming off the books, right? That's Kerfoot's 3.5 coming off the books. Who else is on here? Justin Hall's 2 million coming off the books. So right there between Kerfoot and Justin Hall, that's $5.5 million of cap space this summer. Between those two players, that's going to be gone. I think that's actually a good thing for them. Plus, if you move out some of these other guys that I mentioned, I think that's actually going to be a good thing for the Leafs. What else are you guys saying? No, Plasma says, but knowing the Leafs, they try and sign the hottest free agent with that 14 million. And that's the biggest mistake they would make if they go down that route. That is not what they need. They need depth, right? Because I hate to say it, once we saw the amount of pressure on Matthews, Tavares, Marner, and Nylander, you need to spread the wealth per se, right? So if you look at that top four plus Robertson plus Nyes, just right there, those six guys, I like that group. I really think they need to develop their defense. And I think they need to, again, it's hard for me to figure out who they could maybe bring in because I said this for the Oilers before the deadline. I thought Matthias Ekholm was a great addition for the Oilers. I said when everybody was talking about Carlson to the Oilers and this and that, and I was looking, I'm like, so if Nashville's selling, why don't they go after Ekholm? And they ended up going for Ekholm. That's the kind of guy that I think the Leafs need to look at. A puck-moving defenseman that is very good in his own end, right? Not afraid to get dirty, not afraid to rough things up, not afraid to ruffle the feathers. You can't expect that from a guy like Morgan Riley. Morgan Riley's not going to do that, right? He's a puck moving defenseman, good on the power play. You've got that guy, right? That's your quarterback. Now you need somebody that's going to be more of that, right? That Brent Burns, Matthias Ekholm type of shutdown defenseman. And I think Luke Shen is that, but he's a poor man's version of that. He's not that if you're looking to win a Stanley Cup, he's not going to do that in his entirety, right? So you have to look at who's available that can maybe do that for them. Scott said you could buy a whole lot of good with 14 million. 2 or 3 guys with skill and grit will get them there. Yeah. Yo, Scott Jacob is putting in the facts here. I 100% agree. I think that's really what they should be looking at here. And I think if you're looking at the reality, like if you can, again, I think you use that on one forward, right? One gritty forward, you're probably going to have to overpay, right? And I hate to say it, maybe it was an overpayment for Zach Hyman for the Oilers because he really hasn't produced much. But that's kind of the player that you're looking for. Now, I think we've done enough research on the Leafs. I want to look at who's available this summer that would even be of interest to the Leafs because I want to see who's available this summer, and you guys could jump along with me. I'm on Cap Friendly. I want to see what free agents would be realistically a good fit for the Leafs. So let's take a look. So, so who's available? Yeah, James Van Riemsdyk, but it's not really that good of a class. I don't think Jordan Stahl's going anywhere, but Jordan Stahl is that type of center, right? Like I look at some of these names: Dubois, Jordan Stahl. If Ryan O'Reilly doesn't stay, those are the type of guys I would be looking at. Who else is available here? I know they were looking at Tyler Bertuzzi at the deadline. If he doesn't stay in Boston, Tyler Bertuzzi would be really interesting for the Leafs, right? Kind of that Matthew Tkachuk that the Panthers had. That's the kind of guy that you're looking at. Alex Killorn could be a really interesting one. If they don't overpay for Alex Killorn, I would take a look at Killorn. I don't see Killer leaving the Lightning, but due to cap constraints, the Leafs, if there's one guy that I think could be underrated, right? Because everybody's talking about like Jordan Stahl, Dubois, but if they could get a guy like Alex Killorn on a fairly decent deal, I think that's a really, really good fit for the Toronto Maple Leafs because he's got that his nickname is Killer for a reason, right? Alex Killorn is the type of forward that can, if he has to, can jump into the top six. He's a penalty killer. You played him in the first round, so you know what he's about. I think Alex Killorn, with that pedigree he has, would be a really interesting fit for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Who else is available here? I think that's I mean, they already tried Nick Foligno, right? They've tried those type of players. I think that's a really interesting guy to look at. If they could bring in a defenseman, I'm not sure who's really available. None of these guys really wow me. Um, I mean, if Orlov was interested in going to Toronto, I would definitely look at that. But I think Orlov is really looking at Boston or Washington. He might end up going back to the Capitals. Damon Severson would be kind of interesting, but he had kind of a down season. Vince Dunn in Seattle would be interesting on the back end. So let's just say hypothetically, with $14.5 million of cap space, okay, you re-sign Ilya Samsonov, right? So that's one. So $14.5 million on probably three players. Ilya Samsonov. You look at a forward. What gritty kind of grinder forward could they get? Alex Killorn. Maybe it's Alex Killorn, okay? And then a defenseman like Vince Dunn. If the Seattle Kraken do not keep him, what kind of group would that look like for the Leafs next year? Right? So now you've upgraded in terms of maybe leadership, in terms of pain in the assery, right? Excuse my French, but a guy like Killorn is a pain to play against. So Alex Killorn comes in. Vince Dunn on the back end. He's kind of a shutdown defenseman, but can move the puck, and I think would be an upgrade over TJ Brody. And then you keep Ilya Samsonov. You're telling me you can't get those three guys in, even if you have to overpay, right? Let's say you give Killorn a 5-year deal at $5 million per season. Who cares about 5 years from now for the Leafs? The Leafs don't care where they're going to be in 5 years from now, right? Even if you have to overpay Killorn or you buy him out, who cares? If the Leafs win the cup in the next 2 years and they're able to extend the window for Matthews, who cares? Or even if Matthews walks next summer, if they lift a cup over their head next summer, is it worth overpaying guys like Killorn and Dunn and maybe a guy that they already have in Samsonov? Is that not worth it? Maybe sign Taze if he doesn't retire. I don't know if he would do that, but I appreciate that. And thank you for joining us, Blue Line Hockey. I do think that's kind of interesting. But with where the Leafs are at, as frustrating as this is, and again, this is kind of armchair GM. So we don't know if Vince Dunn or Killorn or Jordan Stahl or even Samsonov for that matter, if they even want to sign with the Leafs. But I think with where the Leafs are at, they are not that far away. They really aren't. And we talk about how here we go, another season. They lose to the Panthers. We always forget that the Panthers were the best team during the regular season last year. We seem to forget that that team last year was really good. And you look at that team right now, right? Tkachuk is playing really well. And Luis mentioned in here earlier, Sergei Bobrovsky they ran into a really hot goaltender. Sergei Bobrovsky really made a difference in this series for the Panthers. So don't get it twisted. Like we talk about how this is another year where the Leafs, like they made it to the final eight. That's very difficult to do. So, like, I understand it. It's always the joke. It's the easy butted jokes. Like, yeah, the Leafs got past the first round and won one more game. Totally get that. But it is so hard to win. And in a market like Toronto, that's not acceptable, but it's realistic that they will not likely get here more often than not. But the more times that you make the playoffs and the more opportunities you give yourself, that's it, right? And I think they need to find the right combination of a good defensive system with a good coach and a little bit better defensive talent in general. And the Leafs are going to be right back here next season. And I don't even like the Leafs, right? I kind of enjoy watching the Leafs fail, but the reality is they really aren't that far away. They really aren't, right? Biases aside, right? I'm an unbiased channel. I loved watching the Leafs lose. I really did. I love watching the Leaf fans suffer and this and that, but they are right there. They really are. So, what else are you guys saying here in the chat? And don't be afraid to chime in. I only bite on Sunday afternoons. And last time I checked, it's Saturday. So, you guys should be okay. Let me know what you guys think down below. Make sure to like the stream as well. I really do appreciate that. Um, I missed what you said about Bertuzzi. Maybe he could be good. Yeah, Plasma. I think Bertuzzi would be a good addition to the Maple Leafs. But again, it comes in at the price tag, right? Like if you're keeping O'Reilly, if you're going to bring in a defenseman, you might not be able to bring in Vince Dunn if you bring in Bertuzzi. Again, it depends on if he wants to go to the Leafs. Does Bertuzzi even want to go there? So those are the kind of things you have to look at. But I think the Leafs should definitely be looking at a guy like that to kind of counterbalance the Matthew Tkachuk, or I kind of look at Evander Kane right now for the Oilers, right? When they kind of need that, somebody to flip the switch, Tyler Bertuzzi can do that for the Leafs. And I think that's kind of what, some teams maybe even taking liberties on guys like Marner or Nylander. A guy like Bertuzzi can step in and say, hey, listen, bro, step back, right? Back off. That's kind of what Bertuzzi can do for you. So I think he'd be a really good fit, but I don't know where his pulse is right now. Does Bertuzzi want to leave Boston? Does he go back to Detroit? I don't really know what's going on there, but yeah, I think Bertuzzi would be a guy to look at. Yeah, and that's true too. I don't know if Boston has the cap space. Very good point. Very good point. So yeah, right now, if I had to look, if I really like the idea. I'm kind of fantasizing about the idea of a guy like Vince Dunn going to the Leafs blue line because I think the Blues were really upset. I mean, you look how different the Blues defense has been since he left, right? They brought in Krug, Justin Falk. They've got some good defensemen there. They have not been the same since Vince Dunn left the Blues. So I think Vince Dunn, if he becomes available, oh, chef's kiss. I think he's a really good defenseman. If the Leafs can find a way to bring him in there, I think that's a really good addition. I think up front it's a little bit more wide open. I think again, I don't know where some of these players' heads are at yet, but Jordan Staal, Jonas Donskoy, we already talked about him a little bit earlier, but I look at Tyler Bertuzzi. Those are the kind of guys you should maybe be looking at. And they've tried different guys. They've tried different combinations, right? They've brought in Nick Foligno. That didn't work out. They brought in Wayne Simmons. That didn't work out. So they need to bring in that type of player that just fits and has good chemistry with some of those guys in the top six. A guy that's a pain in the neck to play against, but also isn't going to take stupid penalties like Nazem Kadri, but also can produce and can handle the pressure in Toronto. It's a tough combination to find, but I'm sure those guys are out there. And that's why I think Jordan Staal, if the Leafs aren't able to keep a guy like O'Reilly, I think that's a really good one to look at, but we'll see how things go. I think that's the thing too. I think a lot of guys want to go to the Leafs, but I think those guys will filter themselves out. Like if they're not interested in going to Toronto, it's probably because they don't want to deal with the pressure of Toronto. So those guys will filter themselves out and probably won't end up in Toronto. So that's something to also kind of keep in the back of your mind as well. If they could sign Gallant, that might help out. I don't think Gallant's a good fit, blue line hockey. I think that's an interesting bet, but I don't know if that's a really good fit. I'm trying to think who would be a good fit though. That's kind of the question. I don't think Laviolette's a good fit with the Leafs. Um, I mean, I'm waiting for at any point that Sheldon Keefe and Dubas are fired. Um, I think within the next day or two. I think before Tuesday, we'll know whether Keefe and Dubas are gone. Within the next 2 days, I think they're going to figure that out this weekend, and either Monday or Tuesday, we'll get that news. Trying to think of a coach. I mean, I look at guys like Barry Trotz, Rod Brendamore, Pete DeBoer, who's doing well with Dallas right now. Those are the kind of guys that the Leafs need. That's the kind of guy that would be a perfect fit there. I'm just trying to think who's available that would be that type of coach. Not Daryl Sutter. I don't think Daryl Sutter would definitely he's too much like Mike Babcock with the old school, and that's not gonna gel and jive with some of the younger guys, probably like Robertson or Nyes or even Marner or Matthews or Nylander. So you have to it's kind of like the Rangers coaching situation. You have to find the perfect blend for that team. What's going on, Surreal? Thank you for joining us. I think they need more money for sure, whether it's Marner or Riley or Murray. I think Morgan Riley and thank you for that, Surreal. I think they can move out more Murray. I think they can move out Brody as well. I don't think they're going to move out any of the core four. I just don't think it makes sense because there's going to be so much pressure on that player coming in to replace Nylander or Marner, or whoever they trade out, and whoever comes in. That is such a huge shoes to fill for that player. It's not gonna. I don't think it's a good idea. I really don't. I think you have to build around what they already have. Um, yeah, and I think they just extended Morgan Riley last summer, so I just don't think that's gonna happen, right? You don't sign a guy and then a year in say, "Oh yeah, you're gone." I don't think that's gonna happen. Morgan Riley's been there for so long too. I just don't think they're gonna do that. I've heard that one out there. I just don't think it's gonna happen. Um, but like I said, I think there's some really interesting forwards that if they are available, that they should be looking at. Like I said, I've already mentioned this earlier, but for some of you guys just joining in, Jordan Stahl is a name that I kind of thought might be an interesting fit. Um, Alex Killorn, I think, is a really big dark horse. If the salary cap isn't there for the Lightning, and if he isn't married to staying with the Lightning, Killorn could be a really good fit. He would look really nice in a Leaf sweater. So Alex Killorn, Jordan Stahl, and there was a third guy I was looking at, and that was Tyler Bertuzzi. So keep an eye out for some of those guys. And on the back end, I'm really falling in love with the idea of Vince Dunn because he could play the left side, he could play the right side, he could play anywhere in those first two pairings for the Leafs. I think that's a really, really good fit there. But again, if he likes it in Seattle, he might not want to leave. So we'll see what happens there. So, guys, if you can, make sure to like the video. I definitely appreciate that a ton. Um, so I think we're gonna leave it here, guys. I've been talking for a little while now, but I really do appreciate you guys joining us here. Thank you so much for watching this stream. Guys, I just released my new shop and I just got the new sample of the shipment. We've got hats in it, t-shirts, mugs, stickers, all that stuff. So make sure to check that out down below and throughout my other videos. Make sure to check out my Leafs video from earlier this afternoon as well. It was a really good video and I kind of delved into that. But I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts here today. Are Lou and Lane gone yet? No, the Islanders apparently are going to be keeping those guys. And apparently there's a name, I think his name is John Miller, who worked with the NHL for a couple years, who might be more on the financial side for the Islanders. So if the Islanders are going to bring somebody in, I think it's John Mitchell or John Miller. One of those two names, who currently or in the past worked in the NHL, could be coming to the financial side for the Islanders. But other than that, I don't think we're going to see any movement with Lambert or Lamoriello. But thank you for joining us, Shazam. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this stream, and I hope to see you guys again next time. Peace.